morning and welcome to the Friday edition of Reaper Pro Tips with 99% of the pie being Quindy, and we'll be nice and give Justin and John a tiny 1% slice. All right, are we ready? 99% of the pie, Quindy, that's you. Sorry for the lateness, guys. I got totally distracted. What's your favorite kind? Obviously, you would be your favorite kind of pie. Hey, Iffy, thank you. 34 months. I almost have to sing the triple sub-anniversary song for you. Sweet. You can also be a quiche if you want, Quindy. Like, if you're really into savory pie or meat pie, you know, you could totally be a quiche if you wanted. Soon, yes. Soon. Oh, it's Friday, and it's going to be a scorcher here. Oh, nice, Captain Clegg. Welcome to the community. Very cool. Very cool. How did you find out about us? Like, Reaper's been around forever, but I know people are discovering us every day. So I'm always curious about where you found us. Oh, cutie pie. Oh, old dad joke. Iffy paints with the dad jokes. Oh. Wow. Wow, I don't know if I can recover from that one. Might have to go with pumpkin. I think pumpkin's a cute pie. Like, you know, like, it's a term of endearment, right? It used to be pumpkin, you know. But then again, you could also be the apple of our eye. Sorry, I'm just playing into the horrible dad jokes now. We're all ashamed of you and me. Well, the mine wasn't quite that bad. I like to believe. I like to believe. I'll just totally delude myself there. Totally. Yes, happy Friday, everybody. All right, let's see here. What are we doing? Oh, yeah, dark skin tones. And, oh, you've been a wargamer for years. Super. Privateer Press, GW. I haven't played Privateer. I haven't played Warmahordes, but I played me some Warhammer back in the day, and actually fairly recently. Starting to play some D&D. Awesome! Yay! Awesome, fantastic. Well, welcome. You will find that Reaper has a very, very awesome and inclusive community, and the first thing we should point you toward, Captain, if you haven't gotten on it, is our Discord. So the Reaper Community Discord is open to everybody, and it's very cool. We have a thing called Reaper Challenge League also, like if you get into the painting side and you enjoy it. It essentially challenges you to finish minis, sometimes with specific colors, sometimes a specific mini. There's all sorts of different categories, and they run on different time frames. So if you ever want to motivate yourself to paint more, as most of us do, Reaper Challenge League is pretty cool. And yeah, so there's the Discord link. Quindy's really cool. She's our mod. She popped it in the chat there. Yeah, no problem. Like, we really do. Like, if you enjoy a community that's really accepting and really supportive and encouraging, like, that is the Reaper community. Like, that's us. Like, boom. There are a lot of miniatures communities out there that are probably better for hardcore feedback if you want people to be rough with you. But if you want people to, like, you know, just support you and cheer you on, like, Reaper community is where it's at for miniatures, in my opinion. So I'm going to pop some of these colors away and grab my skin tone colors. Let's see here. You get to stay. You get to stay. So we started with our ebony skin, so I'm going to grab that, or ebony flesh, I should say. And I did find my ruddy flesh. So we're going to be starting with a very dark skin tone, and I may use a slight transitional color this time, if I have one. Sometimes I'll use something like russet brown. Sometimes I'll use something like ruddy leather. I may just do a mix of that. What I want is a little bit more of a kind of a color that's somewhere in between ebony and ruddy. You can do these, and obviously we have in the past done this combo where you go straight up from ebony to ruddy, and what it gives you is Sphinx's skin tone here. But for new painters, this can be a little bit hazardous because ebony flesh has a lot of black in it, and ruddy flesh is very golden. And so you could go a little greenish if you're not prepared, and it can be hard to fight back from that. So one way to get around that is just to add a color like russet brown, which is a medium brown, or actually the Pathfinder Mwangi brown is meant to be a dark skin tone. That's also an excellent transitional color. So you can just do a triad that's made up of these. Or if you want to go a little bit more red, like to counteract maybe some greenishness that you may think you get, you could actually put a drop of Ruddy Leather into your russet brown mix. That's exactly what we're going to do today. No, we've had wizards with books, Pendrake. Awesome, Captain Clegg. I hope you enjoy it. So that was Sphinxy. So we are going to do like kind of that skin tone on this guy, but you won't be able to see the transitions quite as clearly because obviously with Sphinx, she had a very large face. When you've got tiny faces like this, especially because he's covered with a beard, we're going to do black hair today as well. Assuming I have time, but this is a great mini. It's just he's a great town crier. He's a great merchant. He's all sorts of great wizard. He's just great everything. Not unless it was a tiny scroll. I didn't have any scroll that's this big. I've done books. No idea, Pendrake. I've painted a lot of minis and I've slept since then. Like, like there are pieces when I go to visit George, my client in Santa Fe, that George, when I go to visit him, there are times where I will find a mini in the case that I painted, but I won't remember painting it. Like, and for those of us who do this, have done this for years for a living, this is absolutely the case. You will have painted something for someone and you will not remember painting it, or you will find a mini. Usually you won't find a mini in your collection that you don't remember painting because, you know, that you would have packed up and moved or, you know, gone through and found or something like that, right? But with commissions where you're like, really, you're doing them and then you're passing them off and you don't see them for years, like it's totally a thing to forget what you've painted. How dare I sleep? I know. So yeah, it is totally a thing. Even though you spent 10, 12, 15 hours on that model, you just, whee! Because, you know, human brains are silly things. Absolutely silly things. So I don't even have a good reason for being late this morning other than that I got totally distracted talking to my breeder and bestie, Bridget, about puppies. So y'all just gonna have to give me a pass on that extra 5 minutes. All right, I'm gonna mix up some ebony skin, even though I may need it for touch-ups. So ebony skin, ebony flesh, very, very proud of this color. Very realistic, super dark skin tone. It's that bluish, very, very dark skin. It even has a lot of blue in it, although the blue isn't really visible unless it separates out. But it is in there and it's helping to mute this color and bring it darker and colder. Pup date. Oh, we're just trying to set a date for the puppy evaluation because our breed does temperament testing and conformation assessment at around 8 weeks, within 3 days each way. But it's really hard to set those dates before you actually have puppies on the ground because your girl can always whelp a little late or a little early. It's really important to hit that 8-week window with, like, especially with conformation, because the puppies, like, will be growing in different ways. Like, earlier, they're just going to be, like, silly putty, and after that, they're just going to be, like, growing longer or growing taller, and you won't really know what you're getting. So we're trying to figure out what date, because I have to purchase a flight and rent a car, so, and it's going to be expensive, because flights right now, right? So we're just trying to hash out how we're going to do that, because I'm going to be evaluating the litter, which is the coolest thing in the world, by the way, that I get to evaluate my own puppy and choose my own puppy based on my own evaluation. Like, totally ideal. So, yeah, it's either, and unfortunately, this discussion has made it even more likely that I will not be at ReaperCon, because I may just send David in my place as himself, instead of as part of a David and Ann unit, because I'm going to do 4 drops of russet brown, and I'm going to do 1 drop of ruddy leather just to bring it a little more red. You can see that these colors are very close in shade, right? Because, and by shade I mean lightness or darkness. If you put them next to each other, you can see that russet looks just a little bit darker. But in general, they're very much on the same level, and the big difference is that one of them is far more yellow, which is russet, and one of them is far more reddish, which is ruddy leather. So these are both colors I consider must-haves, absolute must-haves for the MSP line. Russet brown is just one of your most versatile dark browns, and ruddy leather for any reddish leather or even shading on red hair is really useful in general. And anytime you need to warm something up that might be going a bit green. So yeah, we're trying to figure out what weekend the analysis, the puppy evaluation will be, and that will be either the week before ReaperCon, in which case I'm totally not coming to ReaperCon because I'm going to have a 3-day road trip, and then I'm not going to like fly to or drive to ReaperCon again 4 days later. Or 2 weeks before ReaperCon, in which case ReaperCon is still possible. So that is what we were discussing this morning. So it actually is important because I need to buy that plane ticket and book that rental. So I'm going to thin my, my first highlight, which is essentially what this russet brown plus a drop of ruddy leather is. I'm going to thin it about 2.5 to 1. There's 5 drops in here. I'm going to put 2 drops of water in. I'm going to just thin my ebony flesh. I'll probably thin it the same since I have a solid base coat on, and anything I do is going to need to just be like additional shading or touch-ups. There's so little skin on his face that it's easy to overwhelm parts of it. And don't worry, you'll be able to see the skin a little bit better as we highlight stuff up. But now this is one way to highlight this skin tone, and there is another way, but I haven't trialed it yet. But hypothetically, I meant for ebony skin to be able to be highlighted much colder, because there are those skin tones which are almost a blue-black, and they're rarer, but they exist, and you might want to paint one. And so technically, you could take ebony flesh up, not with using all these really warm or reddish colors, but more with a medium brown, like blackened brown, and then using maybe a blue-white. I haven't tested that yet, so I'm not going to like make it an official formula, and I didn't want to do it on this model because when you're doing skin tones that are complex, doing them on a model that has only very tiny skin amounts is not a good idea. If you're going to do some interesting skin tone, don't do it on a model where there's hardly any skin. Do it on a model where there's lots of skin so that you can test it, can see the transitions, and can really get an idea if it's working. Yeah, I haven't done a scroll before. I usually avoid them because it's just a lot. It's a lot of stuff to fill in. I still haven't decided what we're going to put on this guy's scroll. It might just be his grocery list. Actually, yes, I think I'll make it his grocery list. We'll put some Red Bull on there. Put some cat food. Yeah, totally. Some of it'll be like for reals, like saffron, something a wizard might use in a spell, and some of it'll just be like milk, cat food, eggs. Right now it is for sure iffy, yeah. No, you gotta do something on it, but the problem is it's all this very long space, and it can be a little hard. This one is pretty good. This one is pretty easy to get to. You can see that you could probably do lettering on it, or scribbles at any rate. So it's not a difficult one to do, although some of it is buried in his sleeves, so you might have to start some words kind of truncated. I don't want to do a map, Pendrake. I don't think so. I think I want to do a grocery list. Whatever annoys Ron more. Scroll of puppy names. Ah, yeah, green users. Julie emerges. So yeah, we'll see. We'll toss around. I do tend to be in a whimsical mood with these minis that I paint that might go to Reaper's Gallery. What would make me change it would be if we paint this guy and he's looking really good. Like, really, really good. Like one of the better models I've painted. Then I'll take it seriously. Then I'll plop some, you know, maybe we'll do some intricate something or other on the page. But, oh god, a schematic. Can you imagine doing that on this small of a surface, Vic? Like, I could do it, but boy, would it be brutal. It would definitely not be anything I would do on stream. When you've got those, I understand you're being whimsical, and I appreciate it because I love whimsy. But yeah, the thing is, stuff like that I'm not likely to do on stream. Because both it's out of the reach of most painters, and it's not like just a thing where I can give you tips on how to do it correctly. Two, because it's so intricate and complicated and requires a specific style of drawing, much less execution in paint, it's likely to be I try it, I fail, I repaint it, I try it, I fail, I repaint it, I try it, I fail, it looks awesome. You know, and that's just kind of, for me, that's very repetitive. I'm more likely to do that sort of thing on my own stream, the one I tend to do on Saturdays. Because that one I don't mind showing you guys all the hard stuff where I'm painting a competition level model. But that schematics and things that are really intricate, like maps, that require a specific style and execution, that's the kind of thing I wouldn't necessarily do on Reaper. I like doing stuff on Reaper that you guys could maybe like actually pick up a tip or two for actually doing freehand. Not stuff that's going to be like, oh my God, that's so far out of my reach that I'm just, my brain shut down, you know, that kind of thing. So I took my personality test yesterday that I was talking about yesterday, the strengths assessment. Forget what the something or other strengths assessment. I totally forget what it's called. Totally forget. You guys probably know what it is. Some of you will probably know what it is. But yeah, it was interesting. It was really interesting. Can I find it? Maybe. Clifton strengths. That's it. I love personality tests and stuff and assessments, so that sort of thing that kind of helps you figure out yourself. I'm always trying to get a better handle on myself because I would love to be more productive and more generally like in tune in my life. No, not that one, Pendrake. This is a different one. Although I have done that one as well, and it did come back pretty accurate as far as. I mean, I think personality tests are accurate. What David said, pretty much, they don't interest him at all because he's like, well, it's all logical. They're just going to ask you a bunch of questions, and, you know, the way you answer them is going to show up on your test. And, you know, if you're like me, you kind of know how you're, you know what you are and what your strengths are, and so you don't bother with those things. And I'm like, yeah, but there's all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, whatever. But I like the intricacies. I like jumping through the hoops and seeing what they think. Because there's always something surprising for me. So yeah, this has 34 strengths, like human personality kind of factors, and then it organizes them into 4 groups. And I was like 3 out of 5. Then that gives you your top 5. And I was 3 out of 5 in analytical or strategic thinking. That's what it was. I had almost no people skills. So whatever people skills I have, I save for you guys. No, not Myers-Briggs. It's specifically called Clifton Strengths, and it's the one that Gallup has developed over the past 50 years of research and testing. I don't think I've ever taken the Myers-Briggs. Unless that's the ETNJ or whatever, you know, that one with the 4 letters. I've taken a bunch over time. Yeah, but the one I took is specifically called, Clifton Strengths. Clifton is the guy who created it over all the 50 years of testing. And they continue to refine it. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. Some things didn't surprise me. Like that one of my main strengths is focus. Because it's obvious, right? I can sit down and put my head on, you know, miniature painting and just go. And if I focus on a task, I can make a lot of progress in a very short period of time. So that's not surprising. But I was surprised that I had nothing. It wasn't that I had no people skills, but they were vanishingly few. I'm totally a nerd, guys. Totally a nerd. Never forget it. Such a textbook nerd. Myers-Briggs is the 4th letter. Yeah, I don't remember what mine is. Mine is the architect one. I remember what the word to describe it was. But it's the one that wants to leave a lasting legacy and, tends to set far-ranging goals for their lives and stuff like that. Which explains things, right? Like why I spent so much time making a paint line. It's my legacy for the painting community. All right, so this is going to get complicated quick because it's so tiny and it's so hard for you guys to see. Actually, the thing that might help is putting my big black base back here. There we go. So now I'm going to get closer. So now you can see his face a lot more. Now, what difficulties? You can see that he's got kind of he's got a lower eyelid here, a crease between his eye and the cheek, and that's going to be really hard to pick out until we get to lighter colors. You can see he's actually, he's got teeth down here and a lower lip, so I need to figure that out. This is the problem with guys with beards, painting guys with beards. Sorry, didn't want to, like, you know, talk to any of you, speak to any of you guys with beards as if you were, you know, trouble. Although you might be, I don't know. You guys in your 4 letters. I love it. I love it. The problem with beards in general and facial hair in general is it leaves you very, very little room to actually paint the face. And for some of you, that may be a plus because maybe you hate painting faces. But then you have to paint a lot of hair, so I hope you like painting that. All in general, this is just like trouble. It's just trouble. Yeah, I don't remember my specific responses for the Myers-Briggs, but I suppose I could take it again. And it is not unknown for, like, some things to shift over the course of your life, I'm sure. But yeah, I like the Clifton Strength stuff because one of the things that it gives you is I essentially bought the book and that gave me a code to take the test, and then I went back and kind of read it gives you kind of a personalized assessment, but then it also, you can go back and read the book, and the book gives you examples of people who have that as a strength and kind of how they process, and it also in their own words from past tests, and then it also gives you kind of suggestions for how to utilize that strength, like, you know, seek a job that is like this, you know, for example, or a job that allows you to X or Y, which is really cool. And then it tells you if, like, there's somebody who is a great match for you that has a different strength. Some of them will tell you that. So yeah, it's just a cool little test. But yeah, it's interesting. I was trying to get an answer for why I'm drawn to particular types of teaching and not others. Like, I really love teaching you guys on stream, and I love interacting with you here. Like, really, really do. It is definitely on, like, in the top 15 to 20% of things I enjoy. But I've come to realize, and it's kind of the reason that I've backed off of my coaching tier on my my Patreon. I don't really enjoy, like, coaching. And so I was like, well, why do I enjoy this form of teaching but not this? So that's part of why I took this test, is because I was hoping for some sort of aha moment. All right, so I just needed to rebase coat that beard so we have a nice dark black. So you can see the brown coming up now on the skin. Yeah, woo, woo. It's winning others over. Yep. Right, yeah, because a lot of us introverts do a very good imitation of being extroverts, right? Because it's protective coloration, Iffy. I am totally in that category. If you saw me at ReaperCon, you'd think I was an extrovert, except that then I would, like, bottom out and disappear for hours. So, but yeah, that's totally the test I'm talking about. Yeah, and I think a lot of us are like that, where we've become where we can kind of, like, do the social thing because, you know, we can. And especially if it's in a context of a environment that excites us, you know, like ReaperCon. ReaperCon, we're all hobbyists, we're all nerds together, and we're all enjoying ourselves. And so I think maybe we extrovert a little more comfortably there. Whereas in situations where we're under stress, or we're not having a good day, or we're not doing something we love, then we go the opposite direction. So I'm just going to try to hit a little bit of that lower lip, just a little bit. Mostly it's the teeth that are going to make the mouth stand out here, because he definitely has, you can kind of see the line here. He definitely has teeth, and that's what's going to tell us that the mouth is open, because the contrast with that little touch of off-white is going to really help with his expression. So otherwise, now I'm to the point where I need to start putting on this golden brown, and the problem I'm going to run into is just that it's a bit translucent. Doing precise details with paint that's kind of see-through doesn't work very well. So we've got two choices. We can either mix a little bit of white into our ruddy flesh and give it a little opacity that way and work with it that way, or we can underpaint with a little bit of white and put the ruddy flesh over the top. Now, underpainting with the white will give us results, but it will also result in a model with much lighter skin. So I think I'm not going to do that. Sorry. Lately in the morning here, I think as the heat comes up, just stuff goes in the air. So I've been like sneezy Anne, like just in the morning. It's very annoying. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the blessings. I need them all. Yeah, usually this test, the Clifton Strengths, that's not surprising that you took it for Work Iffy, because that's a lot of companies use it to kind of figure out, because if they can figure out what you're strong at, they can better utilize your strengths. You know, it's that kind of thing. Ah, where am I? All right. Yeah, there we go. In focus. All right, I'm going to use just a little bit, and I could use like a bleached linen or a linen white here, depending on how much pop I want. And if I only want a tiny bit of white, I probably should use another one of those off-whites, or I'm going to have to not use a full drop here. Now, there's lots of ways to not use a full drop. You could just squeeze a little bit out onto your brush, for example. I had a bubble there, but, you know, you get the idea. Well, that might be enough as I look at it after I pop the bubble. That's going to profoundly affect the paint. As you can see, it shifts the color, but not a ton. And this is why it's important to just use a tiny bit. Tiny bit of white. This works with clear colors like red and yellow as well. Now, even as you look at this, just with that tiny bit of white, look what you're getting. Opacity. You can't see through onto the palette nearly as much anymore. I am gonna take a slug of water. It is scorch. It's supposed to be 94 today. But we have no AC. Because California. We did actually have AC in our old apartment, but it was very loud, if you recall. So I like this house a bit better, even if I do have to like wear shorts and a tank top when it gets really, really, really hot outside. And we do have fans, though I could do with a couple more. All right, so I'm going to get a little bit of this. I'm going to kind of test it by putting it on the details and seeing how much they come out. So I'm going to try to hit this lower eyelid on his eye. It's a tiny bit. And a little bit on the cheek. The problem with, again, the beard is that even the tiniest highlights are going to change the color of the skin tone underlying. Because even the tiniest highlights are going to cover up so much of your base coat. So the bridge of the nose, I definitely do need to have that highlight. And I probably want to hit the nostril there. And the reason I'm able to get all these highlights so precise, guys, is that I have very, very little paint on my brush. Like, really little. It's just on the tip. And I unloaded it a lot. So I have a whole thing on my Patreon on brush loading and unloading that you want to watch if you are a patron. Otherwise, I think I do a little bit of it on the thinning MSP paint video, but essentially only dip a tiny bit of your brush into the paint and then take a lot of it off. If you've got water in your paint, the paint's still going to come off your brush just fine, and you'll have control. So one of the biggest game changers you can do as a painter is learn to load and unload your brush. And yeah, the thinning MSP paints video is an 1.5 hour long class that I did on how to thin MSPs. So if you are new to the hobby or new to our paint, and you are like, this paint line is different from anything else I've ever done, ever worked with, then you should go watch Thinning MSP Paints. I talk about the ratios to thin them for popular techniques. All right, so let's get this opposite cheek now that I'm over here. Now on the hands, we're going to be able to do a bit more with these colors because they're bigger. But for these tiny little bits, we really just want some stuff to stand out. He's kind of got another annoying thing, which is that he's got those big bushy eyebrows, which means his eyes are really deep set. So it's going to be hard to even see the eyes. Like, I have a hard time even seeing them, much less paint them. So we will have to really work hard at that. This is not an easy model on the face. This model's face is very difficult as far as painting. So just trying to hit some little bits to get those little highlights. And on dark skin, sometimes you just need just a few little highlights. You don't need a lot. Skin normally comes up to near white because of the oils that are coating it. And we can do that with this skin, but honestly, I feel like it's almost a mistake because your brush can only go so small, and because the face is so tiny, putting a lot of big white light highlights, you can already see that the skin looks lighter than we started it. So the more you do that, the more your skin is going to get out of that really dark color that you wanted to start it with. So, hey Maze, how's it going? We are doing really dark skin. And talking about how too much highlighting can essentially make your dark skin not dark anymore. So be careful about how much area you take up with your highlighting. So I'll consider, once I have the teeth in and the eyes in, I'll consider how high I want to take the face highlights. But I really want to see, once I start blocking in colors, I really want to see like how light or dark the skin actually ends up looking. We also need to highlight the beard at the very least. So there's a lot of work we need to do. And when we add more colors to this model, the appearance of the skin is going to change depending on what we add and what we don't. And so remembering that and maybe just going, okay, this is a good start. I'm going to let this sit here until I add more pieces is absolutely valid and what I do all the time. Yeah, I'm with you there, Kirst. I'm with you there. Sometimes I only do like 15 minutes of work a night, and you just lose track of how many nights you do that. Totally, totally. All right, so let's do a hand, because it's a lot easier to show on bigger pieces how this color comes together. So our initial color is the ebony flesh. I'll just do a little touch-up because it looks like it was a little bit thin on the top of the hand back here. So we got that nice dark brown start. That's what the skin started out. But you can see even between this color and what the skin is looking at now that the highlights have changed to the look of the skin. So otherwise I think we've got pretty good coverage here. All right. So mostly we want to look at where the light's falling. And you can totally see as I hold this toward my light that the top of the hand is getting the most light. The knuckles are getting light. This is a little bit more like a mid-tone, and then that underneath the thumbs very much in shadow. As we look over here, we can see that the knuckles kind of stick out a little bit again. And then the hand, as it wraps around that last little thing, is in shadow. So I'll accent those things as I do this. You can also see that the ridges in the hand are sculpted, essentially the tendons and the bones underlying. And so I will pay attention to that with my first highlights, but maybe not with my last highlights. Or I might do the opposite. Let's actually just paint the top part with a bit of our mid-tone and just go over those little tendons, and then we'll try to pick them up with our highlights. You can do it either way. Either you can pick them up at first and then paint in general, or you can paint a general highlight and then pick out your details. probably the second is more intuitive for people. I will try to get the edge of the hand. So you can see that highlight. You can see the transition there. It's just the start. My highlights and base coat are going to be very close together. The closer together they are, the more of a blended effect you're going to get. So I could go up a lot faster with this, but then I wouldn't get a blended effect. On little things like this, like faces and hands, you don't even really need to be painting it as blending. If the colors are close together, it'll look blended because it's such a small area. It'll just get the illusion of blending a lot easier. So if I want this hand to stay dark, I need at least half the surface to stay dark. So that's why I only highlighted half the surface out here. And it may even be that I need to bring that more of that dark further out. I'll kind of adjust the skin tone depending on how it looks as I move forward. So here with this second highlight, I am going to start kind of hitting the tendons. I'm going to be a much smaller highlight though. And I'm going to bring up, remember the knuckles were kind of standing out, so I will be hitting the knuckles on this model. Now on big models, like busts, where you can see a hand or two, the knuckles tend to be a little bit redder, especially on fairer skinned people. But otherwise, you just bring out the knuckle a little bit more, because usually it does pick up the light because they stick out. So like that. I'm going to follow it around the model now. Repeat those steps. So remember, highlight only about half of each finger, and this time I'm not going to I'm going to leave the lines between the fingers dark. About half of each finger, and then get your highlight. And yeah, knowing how much to highlight on dark skin while still keeping it dark, especially on a 28mm figure, is not easy. Because on a bigger model like Sphinxy, it was a little bit easier. Because I had a lot of room on her face, so I could really bring up the highlights and make them very small but still visible. But on this guy, I've got so little room compared to Sphinxy, it can be hard to make the model really look right on the highlight scale. We're close. We're really close. We don't want to take him up too much, or everything's going to bleach out. One moment. Sniffles. Allergy sniffles. All right. So there we go. So that's looking actually pretty good, all things considered. You can see the hand. You can see the knuckles. You can see all the fingers standing out. Hello, Agent Marvel. All right, I'm gonna actually take some black, the same black I used on the beard, and I'm just gonna line between the fingers. Might have to go back and hit the highlight a little bit more if my lines were too big. You always want to line between the fingers. Always, always, always. Everybody loves the Sphinx. Sphinxy is very charismatic. Mostly a great sculpt. If I don't make it to ReaperCon because of Puppy, Julie, I'll send David with the Sphinx for you. Because it's for you. I have decided that Sphinxy needs to live with her sculptor. Not going to give her to Ron, that's for sure. That guy, he wouldn't appreciate her. Oh boy, that's such a huge question, Maze. Like authenticity, working your butt off, having a plan. Probably the best thing you need to do is make a plan. Having an analytical brain, it helps. I will tell you one thing. The reason most hobby businesses don't work is that people don't treat it like a business. So really what you should be looking up is how to start your own small business and treating it like that. It is a business. Doesn't matter that it's a hobby. The mistake is in thinking that it is a hobby, treating it like a hobby, being dumb about the business aspects, and then failing. But it varies a lot, right? Because some hobby businesses are only, like me, I'm just doing, for the most part, digital stuff and labor-related stuff where, you know, if I'm painting a figure, I'm not actually holding inventory or doing anything like that or trying to make my own, you know, boutique paint line and sell that. Like, there's all sorts of different things. You can send it back with David if I don't come. Yeah, I really want to come, but it's looking more and more like I won't be able to do that 4-day turnaround on 2 massive road trips with baby new puppy. So. Okay, so the bottom fingers here are going to be in shadow. That said, we can still put a tiny bit of highlight on the tips. It almost always is a good idea just to bring a little bit of attention. You don't go up as high as you do with the other parts, but you just put a little bit. And that's a stylistic choice rather than a realistic choice. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see, Bob and Julie. But Puppy takes priority. Puppy may be the cause of the first missed ReaperCon ever from Anne. I will miss going too, because I always have fun. And I love seeing everybody, and I like touching base with my Reaper peeps. And it is the best hobby con, so... I'm just going to make this a little bit more solid here. There. So I will not highlight this thumb under here unless I put just a tiny highlight on it because of reflected light. I probably want to do something, just like the fingertips. I want to do something to pick out that thumb. And actually you'll find, like Mazebits, that quality is only, like, it really is only one part of the puzzle. I mean... There's also, like, getting the word out about your stuff. Like, okay, so think of it like this. I'm going to be self-publishing my novel next year. If I just put my novel out, nobody will find it. Or very few people will find it, chances are. It will sell a few copies, and then it will utterly tank after 3 months at most. So part of it is also not just in, like, putting it out there, but in making sure that the packaging aspect appeals to people, so that people are more likely to buy it. And also in, like, figuring out ways to promote it that get eyes on it. So, you know, all these things are part of any business. So it's not just, like, quality actually is not, like, where most of the work is. Usually, if you put out a really good quality thing, you will slowly build an audience for it if you can get eyeballs on it. So quality becomes more important, I think, even down the road. Like, it becomes important to set your brand. And you should also read about branding. Because you want to set your brand's reputation as a high-quality product, if that's the way you run, and that's the way I tend to run. But it is possible to have a very high quality thing that nobody looks at because you just haven't figured out how to promote it. So you just say general hobby business, so I have no idea what you're doing. But you do need to, like, look at just business stuff. Stuff for any business. And of course, in creating a quality product, then you also have to look at what's the definition of quality. I mean, is the definition of quality, you know, if you're doing miniatures, is it producing a high-quality resin miniature? Or is it producing a miniature, but, you know, a decent quality miniature, but in a more affordable, you know, format, like Reaper Bones USA, you know? You also have to question genre. One of the first things you have to ask yourself is actually not even about your product, but who your audience is for that product. Because your audience, the audience you hope to appeal to, should be guided, you know, like, should guide the product. So in writing, the way we put that is when you write your book, you're pretty much writing it for yourself. But when you set out to like edit that book to make it better and to market it, you're pretty much writing it for everybody outside of yourself. And there's two factors there. But even before you think about that, because I know how exciting it can be to brainstorm all this stuff, Maze, what you really need to ask yourself is, what sort of business would make me happy? What sort of business would be sustainable for me? That's a really important question. Don't skimp on it. What sort of work and what amount of work will be sustainable for me in my normal, ordinary life? Which brings us to the don't quit your day job caveat. Not until you have a reliable income. So you got to assume you're going to be running this business while you're doing your normal, ordinary life. And without neglecting other things that are important to you, like family or free time, or just detox time. Giving yourself time to just veg and not work. Very important for a solo entrepreneur. All these things. I could probably do a class on this. Except there's a limited audience. You also have to ask yourself what sort of business structure you're going to be doing. If you're just going to be a solo entrepreneur, or if you're looking to scale up in the future, you want to define the levels that will happen at, if so. For example, again, using writing as an example, many writers will actually incorporate under their own name, or they will create a publishing company, whether it's just for them or whether they're meaning to publish for their friends. But they will essentially create a timeline when they first start. They'll be like, all right, so eventually I'm going to become an S corporation, and the trigger for that is going to be when I'm making more than $50,000 a year. So think about business structure. Essentially write a business plan, just like any business would. Doesn't matter if you're a hobby business or any business. Yeah, the burnout is real, Kirst, for sure. It's deep, but it's what you need to do to be successful. Like, I can't even tell you, I have spent over a year researching and studying and reading and listening to stuff and doing seminars for this stuff and everything. Like, go into a deep dive, Maze, because it's much easier. Like, when I first looked at self-publishing, I just looked at it and it was so much work. It was absolutely overwhelming. There were so many pieces. And that's the same with starting any business. When I first looked at the Patreon, it was so overwhelming and there were so many pieces, right? And so also ask if it's within your personality profile to do this kind of business. Like, what I'm learning is that, like, I do well on Patreon, but I have to approach it from a style of teaching that is me, right? And I'm not I'm not the person who's going to run out and influence 20 friends to buy a product. I'm the person who's going to analytically break it down and explain the techniques to you so that you can understand them better. Like, that's my style. So that's my style of Patreon, and that appeals to a certain audience but doesn't appeal to others. So somebody who's a real people person and who really like goes out and electrifies people and is super like engaging and enthusiastic could have a bigger Patreon than me, right? Because they appeal to maybe a larger section of what the audience wants. Like, that's a thing. So you also have to ask yourself those questions. Like, what kind of personality? What are my strengths? And is this business idea going to play to those strengths? Or am I going to try to be covering my weaknesses for the whole thing? And that's not a recipe for success. All right, so got, again, top of the hand, highlight. Picked out the knuckles. You can see where I picked out the knuckles down here as well. And so I've got really a shadow just falling right under where the hand bends. And I've got another one. And that's not really a shadow. It's just my base coat color. But notice how, as I have highlighted the skin here now, it is lighter looking. And it's just the natural thing, like I said. And how much, if I wanted to keep it really, really dark, then I would have started with this color, probably shaded down with blue liner, or I would have done blue liner and gone up to like this skin color. And like I said, gone a lot less warm probably on my highlights. But this still is giving us a really, really dark skin tone that is convincing. And that's what we're aiming for. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think I am going to, that's pretty much what I'll do for starters. So I may come back to these skin tones depending on how everything else turns out, but I want to get the hair highlighted and I want to start working on other parts of the model before I go back to the skin. I may do the eyeballs. The eyeballs are rough. Let me see. I kind of want to use, I always want to use an off-white for the eyeball. Usually a grayish brown, a pale grayish brown, like a bone color will work. I'm going to use skeleton bone today. How about that? Skeleton bone for eyeballs. Bet you didn't think about that one. But it's totally fair color for eyeballs. So let's do that. We'll put out, we're going to do a 4-to-1. I'm going to shake up my white really well. Want it to be really solid. Whites and pale colors, off-whites, don't separate out as much as general rule as some other colors do. Like colors that are very intensely yellow do tend to separate out more than as far as sitting in the bottle. You have to shake them a bit more before you use them. But in general, off-whites are very stable. Don't require as much. But if you do squeeze them into your palette and you see any amount of separation at all, stop, wipe that out. It means you've got water binder that isn't in solution, and then shake it up again and put the drops down. Yeah, Maze, it's a big decision. You don't want to just like throw yourself out there without giving it a good deep think about your own capabilities and the time you have and the time you're willing to spend. Whether the type of product or the type of business that you're thinking of doing suits your personality. Also, whether you have the financial means for it. You know, like over the long term, have you factored in advertising costs? Stuff like that. There's always somebody out there who's going to tell you how to do something on a shoestring. But it can be stressful to you if you're starting a business with very little cash. There are definitely certain businesses that work better that way. I would say that starting with a Patreon, if you're doing like anything crafting, like if you're a 3D sculptor, then Patreon could be very good for you because you don't really have any overhead and you're mostly giving out digital goods. But some products are like, if you're doing an actual product, you can get into trouble very quickly with costs and also paying taxes on inventory depending on the country that you exist in. So all these things. So really ask yourself, like, and put together, if you're doing physical goods, you need to really put together a realistic assessment of costs, including your own labor to pack and ship and etc. And if you're like, I know you asked previously if you could learn to do your own paint line. So if you're doing something like that, where you're going to be producing a product or labeling a product or doing any of that, that labor time is a real cost. Especially if you already are, if you're carrying a full-time job in the meantime, or even a part-time job. All these are things you need to think about. It's very complex. It's has many moving parts to be a successful entrepreneur. But it is worth doing your homework and not just jumping in. Although I know that some people do love to jump in. I am the opposite of that personality trait. And to be fair, with something like Patreon, you could jump in, sink or swim, without too much cost to yourself. If you totally F it up, then your Patreon will have a terrible reputation. But do keep in mind that if you do that and you do not do well, you've established a reputation, not necessarily a good one. So that's why I say it's better to take your time, even if that's kind of against your quintessential nature. It's better to take your time. Because you don't want to get out there and then have people have a bad impression of you. Then you're going to have to fight against that bad impression if you do a second project that you're better prepared for. All right, so I'm looking out here and I've got a little bit of bones material showing underneath the eye here. So I am going to bring my base coat in. This is one of the reasons I kept that base coat all ready. And then I'm going to try to hit that eyeball, which is going to be fun. I use a wet palette very rarely, Mage Blitz. It depends on the style of painter you are. If you work with thicker paint and do a lot of spot blends and you like a more artsy look with some texture and things like that in your paint jobs, or you want to be more spontaneous, then a wet palette can be very good. Also, if you live in an arid climate, a very dry climate where it's hard to keep paint wet in the well palette. Although I have painted, I mean, I'm living in an arid climate and I still use a well palette, so there you go. However, if you are just learning and you are trying to understand paint consistency, I recommend doing both. Because the well palette is going to let you understand paint consistency better. It's going to teach you how a paint feels when you thin it 2 to 1. Whereas on a wet palette, your paint consistency is always changing because water is being wicked from the sponge into your paint and from your paint down into your sponge. And that's kind of the point of... Hey, at least it's making you want to paint, Captain. But yeah, so the point is really try both. I find that the well palette is nice to get a sense of what your paint consistency should be for certain effects. And then once you have that on an intuitive level, you will be able to go to your wet palette and essentially just be free and spontaneous and have more fun that way. Whereas if you do not do that right away and you're trying to master paint consistency, it will take you longer unless you really have a knack for it. It can take you longer to internalize all those factors because you're struggling with the fact that your paint never stays at the same consistency. Yeah, these eyes are very small. This is not going to be fun, folks. All right. I think I've got them blacked in, though. You can kind of see them black, painted at straight black. This is the only time when I would actually use black to fill in an eye, when I'm using a very dark skin tone like this. Yes, thank you, Big Apple. If you really have that question, Maze, go over to my YouTubes. I just put up a thing on the differences between the two palettes and the pros and cons. Thanks for reminding me of that, Big Apple. It's been like a kind of crazy last month or so. And sometimes I forget whether they're public or not. But yes, I just did a round out on palettes. And this month I'm going to do brushes. All right, so there's our eyeball. And I wanted to use skeleton mode for this because even though it's not pure white and it's not going to show up as starkly as a pure white would, but I kind of want that because one, his eyes are overshadowed by big brows. So a big bright white eyeball wouldn't make any sense. Two, against this dark skin tone, that white is going to stand out really unrealistically. It's going to look like a cartoon character. So I'd much rather use this off-white because even this off-white is so much lighter than the surrounding skin. You can see that it's showing up just fine. Now for this one, I have to approach from this side of the model. And I really want to flatten my brush out. So I'm going to rinse it out, reload so I have really good control. So yeah, if you go to my YouTubes, you'll get all sorts of awesome like videos for starters, Maze. I just started really like concentrating on my YouTube late last year to make it a useful resource. All right, this is gonna be hard. All right, so load up the brush. Here's the paddle. We're gonna use a paddle because we need it to be really, really thin. Load up the brush, flip it 180 degrees, unload, flip it 180 degrees, unload, flip it 180 degrees, unload. Now we have a wide part and a really, really razor edge part. We're going to use the razor edge part to paint this. Pretty decent. Now I need to touch it up a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit on the eyebrow, so it is a little messy, you can see. So, but now I can touch it up. And I'm going to touch up the lower lid because it's still a little wide toward the inside, you see there. I'm going to touch up that lower lid with my skin tone. so that I have two good eyeballs. I'm going to touch it up looking at it from the front so I make sure that I can try to even them out. And of course the scroll is really getting in the way here, and that's the problem. I'm going to try to go in over the nose. We're getting there. Yeah, there we go. All right, so there we've got two decent eyes that are more or less, the whites are set. Now I can go back in and retouch to bring them up a little brighter if I want. They are showing up a little brighter on camera than they are in person. So I can once again load up my brush and just use a little bit of paint. And try to just make sure that I've got a nice solid coverage of that white. There they are. Okay, so if you were trying to make this the light source, be aware the eyes would be totally in shadow. You'd still get some light on the tip of the nose, but most of the face would probably be in shadow. When you're doing a light source like that, you also have to ask yourself if it's the only source of light, in which case the rest of the model turgid has to be painted as if it's in the dark or very dim light. And then you kind of have to use, like, I did a thing on this for the Patreon on how to do OSL, but essentially you're drawing lines based on where you can draw a connection between the light source and the rest of the face. So like, for example, you can see that if I draw a line with my brush from this jewel, it doesn't hit any of the front of the face except for the tip of the nose and the beard down here. So the rest of the face stays dark. So that's the downside trying to do a dramatic lighting effect like that. A lot of people just try to paint the model normally and then suggest a light source, but that doesn't really work at all, because you're essentially, then what you're saying is that the model's in normal light and that this gem is brighter than the sun. So it doesn't really work very well. It's a lot of what people do though, because they don't know how to paint a model that's in darkness. So it's still, but it's not very successful because of that. But yeah, if you're on my Patreon, I do have if you look up OSL, I believe it's tagged under OSL. I did a PDF where I showed various stuff. Honestly, you don't have to do much, Big Apple. I mean, if I just did these little eyeballs, like these little dabs of paint, like, don't be afraid to, like, you saw how I messed the one up. Then all you have to do is kind of go back on the top and the bottom and make it a little thinner by using your black and your skin tone. Yes, it takes precise, like, control, but I mean, that's why you work on your brush control. That's why you work on lining and doing details, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. And if you really want the ultimate eyeball trainer, then buy a Faceless Horror, sculpted by our very own green users, Julie Guthrie. Faceless Horror is the ultimate practice model for eyes. It will start you off with big eyeballs, and then it will give you some tiny eyeballs. You can paint all different sizes of eyeballs and try all sorts of colors and techniques. All right, let's do, we're moving right along. It's over. It is 11:45. Let's, and I'm going to go over a bit because I was late a bit. So I'll go 10 minutes over. So we have 25 minutes, which should be enough for me to do the hair. So with hair, as y'all know, I like to go a little bit bluish if it's black hair. But I don't want to go too immensely blue with this model. Although this is a good place to do blue, because remember, we're going to paint him orange and purple. And orange is the complementary color to blue. So if I use blue liner for my highlights and can just bring in a little bit of that bluish color in the hair, it'll make my orange look even brighter. The power of complementary colors. It's getting warm in here. It might be 80 by the time I take my walk. Oh, it is. It's already 84. It's going to be like 87 by the time I take my walk. Crazy talk. Yeah, it's going to be a hot one today. Going to be turning on the fans. And trying to get any strenuous activity out of the way early. But this should be a good weekend. Hopefully we'll have a couple of people at our paint club on Sunday. So I'm going to mix up my blue liner. I'll show you guys the color. Blue liner with just a touch of white in it. I did about a 4:1. Turns into this pretty gray blue. So it's not an obnoxious blue. If you wanted a very, very blue gray blue, then and you wanted to use an off black for this, then Nightmare Black is your answer. It makes a very blue color. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to take a little bit of this over and do another highlight. Because we're doing black hair, we want our highlights to transition very small and sharp and fast. So we're going to be doing big jumps between colors, and we're going to be narrowing it down fast. We don't want a lot of this color to be over the hair because it's just going to make it not look black. So for black hair, you want to keep 75% of the surface area actually black. And I'm going to do a pure white because hair is shiny. It always will go pure white or very close to it, depending on the color. Because hair is so fine, often it'll appear not to have a pure white highlight. It will appear to be just a super light highlight of the color of the hair. And that's just because the hair is, one, translucent, so it's not fully reflecting the light. Some of it is shining through the hair. And two, it's made up of tiny little strands that each strand is strongly reflecting the light, but because they're so small, it doesn't really translate that way to the eye. Yeah, it would look like gray hair if I got too much on it. Correct. Which, you know, might be in character for this character, but it's not our aim. So yeah, my colors for that are that transition. And I'm going to thin down my black. Drop of water in there since it's been open for a while. You can also see that around like the edge here, you can see that the wall of the paint well is dry, and you can see this kind of like darker edge around the outside of this color. That means it's time to drop a brushful or a drop of water into this paint to keep it at the correct consistency. That is the visual cue you should be looking for when you're working with the paints in your well palette and trying to keep them at the correct consistency. When you see that dried rim, that dried darker rim around your puddle of paint, you know that it is time to add a drop of water. Mix it up, and then these paints will stay good for another, 45 minutes. Half hour if it's really warm and dry like it is here for me. That would be funny, Pendrake. That would be very whimsical. Alrighty, so I'm going to go with my really dark bluish gray. I'm going to kind of look at the model and how the light is falling on it. You can see right away where the light should go. You can see you should have light on the top of the mustache, light on this area here where it's coming out from the side of his face, light down here where it bulges out under his chin, and light back here. Can you guys all see that? So this is all painted black. So that is purely just the light that is shining from the direction of my lamp. And when you have an overhead light source, you can just hold the model up under it and it will tell you where to highlight. And your first highlight should be over most of the surface that you can see. But remember, you do want to keep, look at how light that looks, guys, against the black. You do want to keep a lot of this surface black, so we do have to keep an eye on that. And I hit the top of the mustache there, top of the mustache on the other side. Now, what I will do is just paint a band. You can see that I've just painted a streak, just a solid streak. I've used brush strokes like I'm painting here, but I've filled in all of the little strands. That's intentional. Later on, I'll go back and break up some of this area, but right now I just want to lay in a highlight. So again, back of the hair, all around this back. And once again, I'm going to kind of ignore the creases and just paint it. Out here, I actually want to put in a shadow underneath that hat because the hat is going to be casting a shadow. So I actually want my highlight to go out a little bit more. I'm going to grab some black and bring black in. Hey Bryce, yeah, today is all sorts of crazy. We digressed briefly into like solo entrepreneurship, but it's been a crazy day. Crazy, crazy day. There we go. So you want to put in that shadow there. The hat is going to cast that shadow, but the hair is still going to catch some light when it comes out from underneath that. So hair does tend to look better when you paint it like it's cloth at first and then come back in with, say, your shadow color in this case and break up the sections of highlighting. We'll do the eyebrows too. And toward the end is when I tend to make my highlights more specific, picking up little strands. And I'll be bringing in more black to break these up because I need to have at least 75% of the surface black in order for the hair to continue to look black. So one thing I will do though is I'll bring out this bottom part because it's coming out over his shoulder here, so I feel like there'd be a little bit of highlight there. Likewise, I could pick out the tips at the end of some of these longer strands of hair. Just a nice additional detail at that point. I will have to go in and definitely, you can see how it's already starting to shift toward gray, right? That's okay though. Doesn't matter if it looks like that right now. What matters is how it ends up looking. And so for right now, just work with it. Alrighty, and then the eyebrows. So the top of the eyebrows are going to get a streak of highlight. And those really went gray really fast. So right away I'm going to bring in my black and tune those just a little bit by bringing in, making sure the underside of the eyebrow is quite black. Bringing a bit more of the black back in. And of course, when I break up this whole thing with later on, it'll be better. But yeah, so I will definitely have to break up these eyebrows. Now, another thing to remember is that we are going orange and purple, and probably this hat band here is going to be orange. So it'll be what that does, making this orange, is means that this these eyebrows will show up really dark against it. So we'll probably do orange and purple and gold up here. I haven't decided if I want this to be orange or if I want, like, he's got alternating layers of cloth, and I really need to figure out whether I'm going to go purple, orange, purple, or if I'm going to go like orange, purple, orange. And I feel like I need to go purple, orange, purple because I want the majority of his robe to be orange, which means that like purple, purple, orange, orange, orange. Yeah, that should work. Orange, yeah. Orange, orange. Wow, there's just so much. He's got like so many layers. Like you can see all these layers here. So to alternate, we may have to run some interference. So it's very likely here that we're going to run into a situation where we have orange next to orange somewhere because all of this cloth. Oh, I probably dropped it there. Who knows? Possibly when I was rinsing out my brush or tapping it off. But anyway, not an important question. Yeah, so up here, we're going to end up with purple next to purple or orange next to orange. Almost inevitably, because there's all these different cloth things overlapping, and you can't alternate very cleanly. So what we'll probably do there is we'll do a contrasting trim in gold or silver with, a lot of these pieces do have trim, but we may have to artificially paint some trim on areas that don't, like the outside of this cape, for example. So yeah, because we've got like not only the external cape here, but then you've got this kind of underlayer between the main robe and the cape. Another thing we can do with the underlayer there is we could just go black with it, black or white, and that would be fine. It wouldn't conflict with anything. It would give us another color. It would make the robes appear more intricate. It would give us a third color to use with alternating, and it would solve some of our problems there. I would probably go black with it, honestly, because I'm going to be going off-white with these scrolls down here, so I don't necessarily want a white next to a white. And that seems to me like it would work better. But a lot of times with this, I don't go in with a solid plan. I go in with a thought in my head that this is going to be an issue when I get here. And so as I move through this model, I'm going to need to keep this in mind. So I'll start with the hat, and then I'll probably start by painting. I might paint this orange, or I might paint it purple. I'll choose at that point, and then I'll start blocking in everything else. Like probably I'll block in the orange and see if I like the orange enough. And if not, I'll just paint over it. All right, so next, highlight on the beard. Now here is where, with my second highlight, I'm gonna thin it more so I can do a thinner line. Keep that in mind. If you have thinner paint, you can do a thinner line more consistently. I'm gonna thin my lighter blue-gray here, and I'm gonna start just kind of, at this point, bringing out individual strands. So I might do like, and I'm going to try to make this highlight smaller than my original highlight. So I'm bringing out individual little strands. I think it's funny that my stream camera loves to pick up contrast. So like actually this is much bolder on camera than it is in person. It blends in a lot more in person. And now I'm going to actually show you guys how I would adjust the black at this point, because this looks very overdone, even though in person it's not that bad. But I'm going to come back in with my black. So very shiny, but maybe not black. As you can see, well, most of the beard, I'd say 60% of the beard area is still black, maybe even more if you count that. So I only need a little bit of adjusting. I'm going to grab my black. And I'm going to do kind of a stripe here and a stripe there. I'm going to essentially bring in more black in between strands to break it up a little bit more. You can kind of see that, how that's coming in. And here. And here. So sometimes bringing your black in to interrupt some of these highlights gives you more of a toned down feel. This one's still kind of bothering me. I'm gonna glaze over a little. So now I do have about 75, 25. That's not bad. The eyebrows up here still bothering me. Have a few more minutes. Oop. Just going to pick up a couple of little highlights up top. I'm going to need to really interrupt those eyebrows. They went really pale. So one thing I could do is just put a glaze of black over it. Kind of take them down with a glaze, which will darken everything. Do the back of our hair real quick. Now, that is really bold. And so one thing also I could do is I could thin down my highlight color a little bit more. Let me paint over that a bit. When your highlight color is looking really, really bold, one thing, it's doing that because it has a lot of white in it, and the white is really high coverage. So I'm going to drop even more water into my highlight. It's probably almost a 1-to-1 at this point. And if I get my paint thinned way down, I can be a lot more subtle with my highlights. Now, if I thin it too much, I won't see any impact. So it's kind of a dance. Now a little bit needs to be darker up near the top again. We've gone a little bit far. You can see that it's really easy to get off balance with black hair. It's very easy to go too far and to lose your black. So again, I might come in and put in a little bit of black streaks here to make sure that these are broken up. That's more like what it looks like. Sometimes the shine from the overhead light is making it really go up. You can kind of see there what I'm doing. And again, the camera is making it look a lot stronger than it is in person. So that's coming along. I didn't do his mustache, and that's a problem. Because we're missing a connection there. A little bit too much. See, it can be very, very back and forth to try to figure out how much highlight you need on a given point. And with black hair, I found myself doing a lot of tuning where I'm like, no, that's too light. Oh, now it's too dark. Oh, now it's too light. Oh, now it's too dark, you know. Oh, I need to narrow that. Oh, I need to make it wider. Until I finally have something that reads correctly. There we go. There we go. Now I'm liking it a little more. And again, once I start putting on highlights and doing the rest of the stuff around him, the look of this will change. It may look more highlighted or less highlighted, depending on if I use dark or light colors. So it's all a developing paint job when you paint like this. The interesting question I got in my color theory class over the KublaCon weekend was, well, if you paint piecemeal like this, how do you even know? Like how do you even plan a color scheme? And it's like, well, you have to be ready to adjust your plan in the middle of the model. Like at that point, it's discovery creation, where you just know roughly where you're going, but you're not sure how it's actually going to look, and so you may have to do adjustments on the fly. Which for some people who are really like to know exactly where they're going from the beginning, it can be very frustrating. In which case, I would suggest that those people not paint piecemeal like me. I would suggest that those people do the whole base coat, the whole model, and then work on different parts. Because although I enjoy this style of painting, it is not necessarily the only style of painting. Like, we always say this, but you should choose a style of painting that suits you. Not that suits your instructor or suits the people in your painting club or any of that. Never let anybody tell you that their way is the only way in mini painting. It is a direct lie. Or it's just, they aren't necessarily lying to you, but it's like what they think or what they think they know. And it's, in reality, quite different. All right, I think that's a good place to kind of stop it. I can adjust next week as I wish, but I'm pretty happy with the way that the front is showing up at this point. So it does still look like black hair. It maybe looks a little bit like grayed out black hair, and I need to work on that, but it's getting there. It's getting there. I mean, the big thing about black hair is that most of your hair has to stay black. And so, honestly, I probably need to minimize my highlights even more. I probably need to put a black glaze over this entire thing and bring up tiny, tiny highlights. But this is generally how I do it. Any questions? We are at end of stream. We have a weekend. When we come back on Monday, we will have a kitty. Monday is kitty day. Kitty, kitty, kitty. And we will be continuing to work on kitties and probably. Unless I decide I want to work on something else. No guarantees. But yes, kitty. For all the kitty lovers out there. Do I have to keep painting catfolk? Is that the thing? I do have a catfolk mage. If kitties are going to be like the way you guys groove, then, and I know that Quindy and Kuruniko groove that way, but if kitties are where it's at, I can dig out my kitty mage as well. Carrie Michaels offer the kitties. You guys are funny. But yes, I hope, a reminder, I will not be streaming tomorrow. We have house stuff and errands to do. So I am going to take a Saturday off of, we don't have any good dog people. Like, this is a problem. Why are there only cat people? Why are there not dog people? Like, they treat it like technically it'd be more werewolves, right? We need more werewolves. And I mean, I'll agree with that. I'll agree. We need more werewolves. So maybe I need to grab a werewolf and paint it. I don't know if I ever have on this show, if I've done a werewolf. I don't know what our current, like, Reaper werewolf selection looks like. There are the big guys, the lupines that we did for a warlord. Those are the big ones. But I painted a lot of those already. But yeah. We'll think about it. We'll think about it. I am looking for a bigger model to replace the bust with. So maybe we'll go werewolf. Maybe we will. I'll go and take a look. You're an anything but spiders person. Yeah. Mood. All right, you guys, have a terrific day, and I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you again on Monday. Have an excellent, excellent weekend. I hope you all have a wonderful and relaxing time. All right, bye-bye.